And so as much as it feels like it's big and we're all in it and we do care, the people that are there do care, the numbers are so small because the Democratic Party still has a lock on a lot of people's brains, and the mainstream media and The View and Rachel Maddow and all the rest of the fools out there that carry the water for these idiots, they have literally kept everyone in the dark.
Hey, it's Jordan. I am in Flint, Michigan, East Palestine, Ohio, Tumwa, Iowa. Please support the only independent outlet on the ground covering what the corporate media covers up. People need to find the intersection between all these things: Gaza, the climate inferno, police brutality. At some point, we're all protesting over and over and over again, and not much is changing. In fact, it's getting worse. George Floyd protests a couple of years ago, historic, millions of people, cross-generational, white, black, old, young, you name it. Biden gave police more money. And people have been out in the streets for over a year. We've been covering them more than anyone else. They're doubling down, not just physically doubling down on the bombs, but doubling down on defending it. So I really hope, as a response to this election, organizers and activists, and you dabble in activism, you talk to activists. Obviously, a lot of my sources for stories we cover are activists. I really hope there's some reflection in the activist community, and this isn't me lecturing. This is genuinely, I hope, that maybe we need to change up the tactics here. Maybe we need to look at other countries and how they protest, i.e. France, Paris, Yellow Vest, because these things are going to keep happening. Right now it's Gaza. There'll be another country we're bombing and starving before you know it. The climate, I mean, obviously right now you have people who don't believe their eyes or are just denying it in terms of the climate inferno, and they're going to make it worse. But I don't really think protesting in the streets anymore is going to make shed a difference. I think we need to get a lot more aggressive and a lot more strategic in terms of how we protest, including economic protest, as you and I have talked about a lot. But
it's not that the tactics are not working, it's the numbers aren't there. You got to realize that we are filled with normie Dems, regular normie Dems that feel like any kind of resistance is radical, and they genuinely talk a good game, but they are terrified of doing anything other than going to the voting booth and putting a sticker on their forehead. And so the small number of people that are actually out there in the streets and doing stuff feels like a lot when you're there, feels like a lot when you look at it on TV, but in reality is a very, very small amount of people. And you look at the union movement, we've talked about it frequently on my own programs, and you've covered it extensively as well. Even with the union efforts that you see going on, the numbers are infinitesimal and they're tiny. And that's why I was saying, don't get too hyped about this stuff, because while the unions are trying, they're not there yet. In fact, you see stuff going on right now with the airline attendants once again. Another thing going on where they just don't have the numbers. So hopefully all those different airline unions come together and build some power as well. But Jordan, I'm just telling you right now, there are people that when you tell them how horrible the genocide is, they'll go, yeah, it's really, really bad. And you're like, well, what are you willing to do to stop it? And you're like, well, what do you think? Voting for Trump will make it better? So, no, I didn't say anything about that, you asshole. By the way, asshole. No, I didn't say that, asshole. But the fact is that this is the finite amount of space in the brain that they have to think about these problems. So we have to understand that we are very, very small minority of people, that most average people don't even know there's a genocide going on. They barely even realize, oh, Israel's defending itself is about the only thing they know. And so as much as it feels like it's big and we're all in it and we do care, the people that are there do care, the numbers are so small because the Democratic Party still has a lock on a lot of people's brains, and the mainstream media and The View and Rachel Maddow and all the rest of the fools out there that carry the water for these idiots, they have literally kept everyone in the dark. And that's the untouched people, the people that don't hear programs like this, that don't get involved in any way. They think they're voting their way to the promised land, and they don't want to be bothered with stupid talk of genocide. That's nothing to them, because what do you want? This has been going on forever, hasn't it? And that's the standard narrative. So, Jordan, I'm telling you right now, our problem isn't tactics so much as it is we've got to recognize that the left hasn't had a voice in this country in 50 years. In 50 years, it's been squashed to death, and resuscitating it and building power outside of these structures meant to kill movements is a must. We must build power outside of the electoral system. Anyway,
and I think as we go forward, and it's not going to be the sexiest topic, it's not going to be reacting to every crazy Trump thing, but we're going to have to hear on Status Coup actually look into that. How does that look? We could keep talking about, building outside of electoral politics, but how do we do that? Talk to, labor leaders, talk to, protest type leaders. We should also talk to folks who have done it elsewhere across the pond. How do you do it outside of electoral politics? Because, this merry-go-round that we've been on, I don't know when you started Real Progressives. I've been doing this basically since 2016. Yeah, so we've been basically doing it, this type of work, the same amount of time. And it's just kind of Groundhog's Day, election to election, the sugar high or, the peak of the roller coaster, Bernie Woodstock, then the drop and the deflated balloon feeling. But the common denominator is neoliberalism. I do think the 40-year neoliberal bubble is popping. But
yes,
capital stays in power, and we continue protesting in the streets, but not doing anything more than that. And when I say more than that, I don't mean get violent. What I do mean, though, is get aggressive. And that starts with our economic power, our economic leverage, which we're not using at all. Protesting Amazon for a day ain't going to cut it. Boycotting Amazon for a day is not going to cut it. Continued protests in the streets. It's nice for awareness. Yes, there are power in numbers. If you had, 20, 30,000 people in the streets, that makes a big difference. But it's hard to get 200 people in the streets these days for anything.
Yep. When we talk about the urgency, it's the small thing. We can't get big things done because we can't get small things done. Now, about the crypto, I'm against crypto as a rule, but from a marketing standpoint, what Trump did was masterful. What he did was they created some shitty Trump coin, right? It's not going to take off or anything like that, but it's a signal, just like we're printing money. It's a signal. Well, he made his own little Trumpo coin, right? Now, all of a sudden, to the Bitcoin community, which has massive amounts of money, which this election was funded on the back of crypto, both Democrat and Republican. And by Trump leveraging that, he's telling them, hey, I'm one of you. So that whole community's like, hey, Trump's the guy that's going to go ahead and get the Fed to backstop crypto, to stabilize it, blah, blah, blah. He's making a part of it. Why? And this was the thing my friend Rowan Gray explained to me earlier today. He said, crypto, even though we think of it as international, crypto is really a beast of the United States. Once again, it's a way of flexing out U.S. muscle in this kind of empirical time. This is the U.S. once again taking over the world through a different avenue. And so it makes all the sense in the world that Trump would do this. And so people that are given to that, I mean, a lot of people made a lot of money real quick doing, a lot of people lost a lot of money too, but we don't hear about that. The people that made money, though, those people, they're the heroes. They're the exceptional person, just like the millionaires that support Harris and Biden. So it's a little bit of reverse psychology, but I think we're thinking too deeply about it. We're trying to make them care about these deep issues when in reality, all they care about is they don't feel masculine enough because the woman doesn't want them, so they get to talk shit about it. They don't like the gay people because the gay people make them feel weird. So there's that. They're beating down the finances on top of it. The economic situation was so bad under Biden, and everybody bragged about it. They talked about Wall Street, when in reality, people at the bottom are dealing with inflation. They're dealing with the loss of all the COVID payments, and they're dealing with student debt coming turned back on. So all this stuff is fighting against them, and the Democrats did shit to fix it. So naturally, Trump will suck that right up too.
I agree and disagree. I do think a lot of the crypto stuff, and I'm not an expert on crypto, but it's always kind of come across to me a bit scammy. But what I also think, part of that, like, because crypto, a lot of it is this kind of like bro culture and masculinity, and it's been kind of put into that. Remember the Super Bowl? It was just nonstop crypto ads. But nonstop. I also think when, particularly men, when your wages have been stagnant for 50 years, I mean, all workers, but particularly the men, the factory floor workers, et cetera, when your productivity skyrockets, I mean, we show you the chart all the time. You know, the income inequality, the money skyrocketing to the top. There you go. That's the 0.01%. I think when you're economically not so stable, when you're economically don't have a lot of hope, when you're economically like, it's not like it used to be like, hey, if you keep doing better at your job, you'll be up for pay raises and performance bonuses and stuff like that. You're very susceptible to kind of these get rich quick schemes. And I'm not saying crypto is completely that, but crypto represents and has been marketed as kind of outside of the whole digital freedom thing. Crypto has been marketed as like a way to, take it to the capitalist elite and, get rich, this and that. And that's a very appealing message if you've been basically economically stuck or regressing for years and years and years. So I do think there is that cultural element that they're scared to death of changes and, diversity and gays. But I also think there's an element of like, hey, if you dangle a shiny, if you dangle digital Benjamins when people are working themselves to death and can't get ahead, it's definitely appealing. But overall, I mean, again, this doesn't seem like a drain the swamp pick to me for Commerce Secretary. This doesn't seem like somebody who's like tapping into like the resurgence of labor or wants to grow that. It just seems to me to be a swamp monster. And I just asked MAGA, this is not like me putting on Team Blue Hat. I mean, I voted for Jill Stein. They're all corrupt.
Right.
I can't stand any of these people. But MAGA has to have a come to Jesus moment because you keep voting for not just this guy, but you keep buying into this movement when underneath the cultural grievance that Steve just talked about, there's nothing there economically. Like that chart is not reversing. It didn't reverse under Trump, and it's not going to reverse under Trump 2.0. It's going to get worse. And the people he's appointing.
I'm just letting you know, because these are some things that you can easily predict that are going to come. Trump, they're talking about the DOGE, the Department of Government Efficiency or whatever, right? And they're talking about slashing like 80 agencies. Well, 80 agencies, that's a lot of employees, and a lot of employees, probably many of them are Republican even, right? And you figure that a lot of that is brand new money spent into the economy. So once you tie that up, and then Trump said, I want to bring interest rates down, which is fantastic on so many levels from a debtor's perspective, from a little man perspective. However, that money interest level was an input into the economy, more money going into the economy. Okay, so you cut away the jobs that they're going to slash through the DOGE thing or whatever recommendations they come up with, and then you look at the cutting of the interest income channel. All this money is going to rich people. I want to be clear; it's not benefiting the working class, but it is money. Those people still spend money. It still trickles, very much like urine on your head, but it trickles down. But cutting that off, it's like austerity. So what are they going to do? They're going to fill that bucket with tax cuts. And once those tax cuts hit in, you may not think it's a big deal, but if he lowers interest rates, that's going to make things far more affordable instantly just by lowering interest rates, and then add in a tax cut. And that's almost as good as giving more money to people, because it is giving more money to people. And this is what he did last time. And people couldn't understand how Donald Trump's shitty handout to the rich, they never paid attention to the little teeny scraps he was throwing the working class. And those little scraps meant everything to those people, and they remember it. Democrats have resisted tax cuts. They've acted like we can't do that because they're so worthlessly hell-bent on taxes fund spending. They're full of shit, but you get it. So because of that, they're like, we're going to bankrupt the government. How can we do this? Trump is sitting there saying, I don't give a fuck. We're going to slash these things. We're going to cut that, but he's going to cut in taxes. Once he does that, the people are going to say, I'm breathing again. You lowered costs. You lowered the price of living, and you also lowered my tax outlay.
Well, here's the problem. I mean, unless he goes full strongman and does what Biden wouldn't, which is threaten the companies.
I'm sure he will.
I don't know about that. I don't know how he's going to really lower costs. Not the cost of borrowing. I mean the cost of gas, of groceries, of electric, of utilities, of healthcare. I don't see how he's going to do that significantly. So you might get, crumbs of tax cuts, but I don't see how he's going to lower these costs, because a lot of the costs are just coming straight corporate price gouging. Is Trump
Right.
going to go in there and actually use the tools of the federal government to lower the costs of things, or force the fossil fuckers or the grocers or the electric companies or the healthcare companies to lower their costs? I mean, I don't see that happening.
We have a climate crisis, but guess what? The United States is a net producer, a net exporter, a net creator of fossil fuels. We are no longer dependent on OPEC with the fracking and everything else. And look at what Trump's doing with fracking. He already picked somebody out there that's super fracmo, right? So the U.S. has the ability to offset fuel prices, and watch him do it, just to stick it to people, to say, see, fuck you. Look, I hate Trump for a number of reasons, not the least of which is all the shit that he's done to people that are disabled and so forth, and having to live with people at a WWF screaming at him, teasing him, taunting him, and letting shit out that was properly kept within. And now it's just sort of release the freaks, right?
Yeah.
That is probably the worst thing that he's done. But when you look at this, you've just got to be honest with yourself. I'm not telling you he's good or anything like that. I'm merely telling you that these things have real impact on working people. When he cuts taxes, that's a real benefit to that family, whether we realize it or not. And that is one of those things where they will remember that. And if he releases the fuel and our reserves to offset, to flood the market, to bring prices down, he could do that.